Masechet Kiddushin, Daf Ayin Gimel. Tenor Banan, Ger Nose Mamzeret Divrei Rabbi Yoseh. A convert is permitted to marry a Mamzeret, according to Rabbi Yoseh. Why? Well, as we're going to see, the Pasuk says, Lo yavo Mamzer Bikal Hashem. A Mamzer is not allowed to marry into the congregation. What is the definition of the congregation? That means someone who is, according to Rabbi Yoseh, someone who's born Jewish, a convert, although a convert is now fully Jewish, they are not included in the definition of kahal, and therefore a convert is allowed to marry a mamzeret. That's Rabbi Yoseh. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Ger lo yisa mamzeret. He says, no, it's not allowed. He's going to define kahal differently, more expansively, to include also converts. They're also now part of the congregation, and so therefore cannot marry a mamzeret. Furthermore, ehad ger, ehad ayved meshuchrar vechalal mutarim bekohenet. Although a male kohen is not allowed to marry any of these people, a female kohen, meaning a bat kohen, is permitted to marry a convert, a freed slave, or a halal, an invalid kohen. Still can marry a kohenet. Those special kohen laws apply to males, but not to females. My tamad Rabbi Yoseh, hamisha kele ketibe. Now, back to Rabbi Yoseh. What's the reason that he says a convert is allowed to marry a mamzeret? Well, it's in the Torah. It says the word kahal 5 times. There's a couple of different ways to count them, but they have to do with the mamzer, Amoni, Moavi, Mitzri, Edomi. Count them all together, you get 5. Now, you could have put all these people in one pasuk and say, all these people cannot be Bikal Hashem. Why do you have to have them separate times? So we're going to learn something from each of the 5 and relate as relates to Mamzer and other categories. So, Chad Kohanim, Vechad Levim, Vechad Yisraelim. So 3 of them are going to be that a Mamzer cannot marry a Kohen, a Mamzer cannot marry a Levi, a Mamzer cannot marry a Yisrael. You need all 3 because there's different Kohanim and Levim, Yisraelim have different laws. So we have to learn that all these 3 categories cannot marry a mamzer. The 4th one, chad mishnei mamzer b'shituki. The 4th one, the same mamzer is allowed to marry shituki, someone that they don't know who the father is. That person, since they don't know who the father is not part of kahal. Who knows who he is? Maybe he is a mamzer, maybe not. And therefore, that's a mamzer cannot marry someone who's definitely in kahal, but this one, who knows who he is, so therefore it's permitted. And the last one is to permit a shituki in Yisrael. Again, shituki, we don't know, mamzer or not, but maybe they're fine. And so therefore, only someone who's definitely a mamzer cannot marry Yisrael. A shituki is allowed to marry a mamzer. So you see, shituke can marry a mamzer and can marry a Yisrael. That's the last 2. We now accounted for all 5 of the words of kahal, and therefore kahal gerim, like kahal, we don't have any left over for converts. That means a convert is not included in kahal. These people are all included in kahal, but not gerim. And so that's why, according to the Rabbi Yoseh, a ger is allowed to marry a mamzeret because a mamzer just can't marry someone who's in kahal. A ger is not part of the congregation and is therefore permitted. Good. That's Rabbi Yoseh. Rabbi Yehuda, Kohanim ulviyim mehad kahal nafke, ayitar le lekal gerim. Rabbi Yehuda says, regarding those 5, I'm going to put Kohanim and Leviyim into one category, and that's they're all in one kahal. That leaves over an extra one of the 5 words kahal, and that extra one comes to teach me that converts are also considered part of kahal, and therefore mamzer may not marry a convert. That's one derivation of Rabbi Yehuda. Second one, who maybe Kohanim and Leviyim require their separate categories, because for lots of other laws, Kohanim are still different from Leviyim. But mamzer b'shituke u'shituke b'Yisrael mehad kahal. But I can learn that a shituki can marry both a mamzer and a Yisrael. I can learn that from one kahal, because the point of there is that lo yavo mamzer b'kal Hashem, mamzer vadai hu de lo yavo ha mamzer safek yavo. when the pasuk says that a mamzer cannot marry into the congregation, that's talking about someone who's definitely a mamzer. But someone who we're not sure if he's a mamzer, that person is permitted to marry, and that takes care of shetukeh b'Yisrael. Shetukeh, well, we don't know who the father is. The father might be the brother or father of the mother, or it might be a mamzer himself. We don't know. So since we don't know, it's permitted. And furthermore, bikal vadaihu de lo yavo, habikal safek yavo. From the same pasuk, we also learn that a mamzer cannot marry someone who is definitely part of kahal, meaning definitely kosher. But let's say you don't know if the guy is kosher or not, then a mamzer can marry that person. That applies to mamzer b'shetukeh. A shetukeh is not definitely kahal, so therefore they can marry the mamzer. Now, since we can learn both of these from one kahal, that leaves over an extra kahal, one of the 5. And from that, I can learn that a convert is part of kahal, and therefore a mamzer is not allowed to marry a convert. The third way of deriving the same law, no, maybe I need the 2 kahals for the 2 shetukeh laws. V'ta'amed Rabbi Yehuda mehacha hakahal chuka achat lachem v'lager hagar. Rabbi Yehuda does not derive from any of the 5 kahals that we saw before that are about marriage laws, but rather from this hakahal that appears with regard to wine libations that you have to bring with korbanot. So everyone has to bring those exact wine libations, not only people born Jewish, but also they also have to have the same laws. And here it says hakahal. So you see, it talks about the convert, and it calls it hakahal, right? Everybody in the congregation, including the convert. So we see from here that a convert is part of kahal, and so there you go. That's how we could learn that since a mamzer cannot marry kahal and a get is kahal, that's how Rabbi Yehuda learns it. Rabbi Yosef is going to say, wait a second, hakahal, period. This separation here, hakahal does not apply to get, as we say right here. But Rabbi Yosef, the word chukachat is a separation. It says something about kahal, period. That's a separate matter. Then it says something else about get. The get is not part of a kahal in that pasuk, and that now we know the derivations of each opinion. Now we analyze the next part of that baraita, that a female kohen, a bat kohen, is allowed to marry a convert, a freed slave, or a halal, even though a male kohen is not allowed to marry a female convert, shivcha meshuchreret, or halala. This supports Rav, because Rav says that kesherot are not have no problem marrying pisulim, as long as if she is the one that's kasher, she's a kosher person, kosher kohenet, she can marry someone who has one of these pisulim, even though they would be pisulim. If they were female, they would be pisulim to a man. Now we have a really fun story. Darash Rabbi Zera b'Mechoza, ger mutar b'mamzeret. Mechoza was the city where Rava was the main rabbi of that city. Mechoza was a suburb of Ctesiphon, which was a major cosmopolitan capital of the Persian Empire. The Jews there were somewhat assimilated or converted. Now, there were a lot of converts in the Jewish community in Mechoza. Now, Rabbi Zera comes, he's not from Mechoza, he's a visitor. And he makes a derasha, and he says, Ger is permitted to marry a mamzeret. Regamu kule alma betrogaihu. I guess he was making this derasha on Sukkot, and everybody has their etrog, and he says converts are permitted to marry a mamzeret, meaning that a convert is not part of Kahal Hashem. Now, half the place over there are converts. They got really upset. You're saying we're not part of the congregation? We can marry a mamzeret? We're like a low level, like a mamzer? And so they got upset at Bizera, and they pelted him with their etrogim. Wow. Amar Rava, Mika de Darish Milataki Habeduchta de Shirike Giore. Rava, who's the rabbi in Mechoza, says, would anybody have the audacity to teach something like this in such a place where there's so many converts? You have to know your audience. So Rava gave them a update derasha. Darash Rava b'mechoza, ger mutar bekohenet. He gets the derasha and says a convert is allowed to marry a kohenet, which is the law that we just said. And everybody was so happy they gave him silks. Or they carried him on a silk because they wanted to honor him. Oh, see, Gerim, or like the status of a Kohen. Fantastic. They're so happy. Much better than that other guy who gave the Dirasha yesterday, that Rabbi Zerah. Rava, he's our man. However, Hadar Darash Lehu. Then he followed up with another Dirasha. He says, Ger mutar b'mamzeret. He said the same thing that Rabbi Zerah did. A ger is permitted to marry a mamzer, meaning they're not part of kahal. Amruleh avsideta lekamaita. So the congregation says, you forfeited the first one you said. We liked you. We were happy with you. And now you brought us down, right? And now forget it. We're canceling. Give us back all those, we take back the silks. Rava says, oh, opposite, I'm doing you a favor. You converts, you could marry, you have the most options. If you want, you can marry Kohenet. If you want, you can marry a mamzer. You have the full range of options. So you should be happy that you have this. Don't look at it in terms of your, are we high class? Are we low class? Whatever class you are, it doesn't matter. You have the most options, so you should do me a favor. Apparently, they accepted this. What you see from here is that it's all the way you say it, right? The Bizarra comes and he's insulting them, so they feel bad. But Rava, first he says something nice, he gives them a compliment, makes them feel good, he cares about them. And then he can say the same law after and explain to them, actually, this is going to increase your options. It's not because you're low class. Look, you can marry Kohenet. And so you should be happy. And so they accepted. So Rava was a good rabbi for his city. And the bottom line is, in fact, the convert can marry Kohenet and can also marry a mamzeret, as Rava said. Why? He can marry Kohenet because the kesherot, females who are kosher, have no problem marrying someone who's pasul. That would be a pasul if it was the man who was a kohen, would not be able to marry a woman with that pasul, but the woman can marry a man with that pasul, and can marry a mamzeret, as Rabbi Yosef said, because their converts are not called kahal. Now, next part of the Mishnah, Elu shehen shetukeh, kol shemakir. What's a shetukeh? Someone who knows his mother, but he doesn't know his father. When the kid asks, who's my dad? You say, shh, don't ask that question. Amar Rava, Devar Torah shetuki kasher. Rava says, on the Deoraita level, shetukeh is fine. Why? The whole problem here that they can't marry is the Rabbanan. Maitama, Rov Kishirim Esla, Umiut Pisulin Esla, because we'll follow the majority. You have a woman, we are going to assume that she's single, because if the mother of the Shetukeh is married, well then, if she's married, we would assume that her husband is the father. I mean, you don't need to do a DNA check every kid that's born. You assume if the mother is a married woman, then her husband is the father of the child. And so you wouldn't have to say, however it is, even if it's the milkman, she doesn't say anything, no one says anything, and we go by that assumption. So that wouldn't be a shetukeh. So she wouldn't have to say, she would just make believe. If she was married and the husband, let's say, was away or something, then that would be adultery. So that wouldn't be a shetukeh, that would be definitely a mamzer. So in either case, we're not talking about a married woman. We're talking about that the mother is unmarried. Now, an unmarried woman, think about all the people that she might have relations with. Who would produce a mamzer? Only if she was with a close relative, her father or brother, or with another mamzer. How many people are like that? That's only a few people. Most of the men in the world are permitted to her, and only a few would create a mamzer by being with her. Therefore, we can follow the majority, and so we have this. We know the mother, we don't know who the father is. We'll assume the father is someone that she would be allowed to marry, or allowed to have a child with. And Kol de parish menuba parish. Now, we consider two possibilities of who came to whom. If the man came to her, the man came to her house, so then we apply the rule, anything that separates from the majority, we follow the majority. This applies to, like, you find non-kosher meat, and you find some meat in the middle of the street, and most of the stores are kosher, so you assume it came from one of the stores. The majority are kosher, therefore it's permitted. And so the same thing. Some guy came, he separated from the majority. We assume the majority of men are kosher to her. Now, the other possibility is that she went to some guy's house. Now, in that case, this would be half-half. This would be like if I went into a store, a butcher, and 9 butchers are kosher, one's not kosher, but I don't remember which store I went to, whether it was a kosher or not kosher. In that case, it follows 50-50. In case of a kosher meat, I wouldn't be able to eat it because 50-50 is not good enough for kashrut. But in this case, it would be good enough. So if she went to some guy, so then that would be a doubt that's in his place. And since this particular guy that she went to, we don't know. Is he a mamzer or a relative or not a mamzer or a relative? So we consider it like 50-50. But 50-50 regarding mamzerut is okay. Torah says only someone who's a mamzer for sure cannot marry, but if there's a doubt whether he's a mamzer or not, he can marry. Also, a mamzer cannot marry someone who's definitely kosher, but someone who's not definitely kosher, he can marry. So in this case, no matter what, whether he went to him or he went to her or she went to him, it doesn't matter. At worst, it'll be 50-50. And a shituki, who even if he's 50-50, is allowed to marry a Jew. And so therefore, on a deoraita level, there's no problem. Umatam amru shituki pasul. So why did the rabbis come and say you can't marry a shituki? It's not a problem of mamzerut, because majority of men are not mamzerim. A majority of men who have a child with a single woman are not mamzerim, and if she went there, it would be 50-50, and 50-50 chance is also permitted. So why on Doraita was permitted? Why did the rabbi say no? Because since we don't know who the father is, maybe the father also had a daughter separately with another woman, and then this shituki boy is going to grow up. He's going to meet his sister, go out with her, and maybe he would marry his sister, and for his paternal sister, and since he doesn't know who his father is, so he may marry a sister unknowingly. So we have to prevent that. Therefore, he cannot marry anyone from the congregation. Well, in that case, a shituki is allowed to marry a shituki. That's the law. 2 shitukis are allowed to marry each other. So we should say, no, you can't do that, because maybe that'll be his sister, his paternal sister. In other words, maybe this guy who fathered the shituki with one woman also had a child out of wedlock with another woman, and they're both this brother and sister, and they'll marry each other. But yet there's that possibility. Yet a shituki is allowed to marry a shitukit, and we don't say, oh, maybe we want to make a gezerah in that case also. So he says, what, you think this is very unlikely. You think that one guy, just because he was licentious, he did zinut, and he had a child out of wedlock with this woman, you think it's the same guy, and he went and did it again with another woman? What are the chances? More likely, after he did that, he said, you know what, I should settle down and get married and have proper children. So no reason to assume that it's the same guy who did this twice. Another question. Well, in that case, then the shituke guy should not marry a daughter of a shitukit. Now, a daughter of a shitukit is a shitukit. It's inherited, right? Like mamzerut is inherited. So a bat shitukit also not, because maybe that daughter is his paternal sister. In other words, this man, he was with one woman, and he had a child who's this shituki. Then he said, okay, I'm going to settle down. We don't assume he's going to be promiscuous his whole life. So he settles down and he marries a shitukit. And a proper shitukit. He's allowed to. He's in a category he's allowed to. And then he has a proper daughter. So it's just as likely that where this daughter of a shitukit is just as likely that her father is his father as it is anybody else. And so why don't we make a gezerah also for that? Ela la shechicha. It's not likely. Hachinami la shechicha. So too, it's not likely in the first place that this whole gezerah that you started with, to say why did the rabbi say a shituki can't get married? Because since he doesn't know who his father is, he may marry his paternal sister. It's not likely that's going to happen. Of all the people out there, that's the one person he found, his paternal sister. Who says he has a paternal sister? Who says the father? I mean, it's so unlikely. You're not going to make a gezerah for such an unlikely case. Ela ma'ala asubi o hasin. Rather, the sages wanted a higher standard for lineage, to give people proper lineage. We want to really make sure. If you don't know who your father is, and then it's on the Doraita level, we could follow the majority. It's fine, or even half-half. It's okay. But midrabanan, we wanna raise the level and make sure that for lineage we are 100%, and we don't want to rely on these majorities. Okay, now we have a similar discussion regarding Asufi. Asufi kashir. Asufi is a foundling. We don't know who the father or the mother is. Maitama. So the Vas says on the Doraita level, Asufi is allowed to marry kosher people, and it's only the whole problem is the whole issue is only the Rabbanan is the prohibition. Now why? Eshet ish be'ba'ala tola. Now if the mother is a married woman and they have a child, then we don't ask questions. When a married woman has a child, we assume that the father is her husband, and therefore she's not going to abandon it. Even the father doesn't necessarily know, or he knows and wants to protect his marriage. So they're not gonna abandon the child if she's a married woman. So they'll keep the child. So what possibility could there be? Well, let's say she is only arusa. Now arusa, they didn't consummate the marriage yet, so she cannot. If she has a child, this is a problem. Or if the husband was away for a long time and then she goes and gets pregnant, has a child, so this is a problem, and then she's going to want to give away the baby. So those cases would really be a problem, because in either of these cases, arusa or the husband went away, she's married woman, and their husband or fiance cannot be the father, and therefore in these cases would be a mamzer, and she would have to give up this child and put it in the marketplace. So you're right. This would be the only, but it's a minority of cases where that would be a problem. But since we have many more cases where the foundling would be fine, like if she's single. If she is single and she fathers someone with some guy, although it's out of wedlock, the child is not a mamzer, and so that she might put it in the marketplace, because she doesn't know what to do with it. But that child would not be a mamzer. Or sometimes there are regular married couple, kosher, they have a kosher child, but they're so poor that they can't feed it, and they put the child in the marketplace. So the majority of cases of a foundling is either because it's pinuya, or because of the avon, and they're kosher. Only a minority of cases, also if it's eshetish and the husband is around, they would keep the child, so that they don't count. So therefore, we only have to worry about a married woman who's went away, or whose husband went away, or that she was engaged and has a child. That's the only ones whose child would be mamzer, and they would put the kid in the marketplace, but that's a minority. Most kids in the marketplace are kosher. The same law, Torah says, Only a definite mamzer cannot marry a definite kosher person, but if but a mamzer for sure cannot, his what he can't marry. But if he's not sure, if we're not for sure mamzer, then you can marry. And only if it's a definite kosher person you can't marry. But if it's not safek, then it's permitted. So therefore, on the Torah level, most foundlings are kosher and would be permitted to marry into the congregation. Umatam amru asufi pasul. So why is it a problem? Shema yisachoto me'aviv. Again, maybe he will grow up, and this boy who was a foundling will end up marrying his paternal sister. It could be maternal sister also. We're less worried about that because presumably the bride, let's say the bride has a mom, and we know the mom, and she's an upstanding person, so we don't assume that she had committed adultery or anything. So we leave that out. But it's much easier, harder to detect, and easier to happen for that the father had some other child from a different woman, and that happens to be his, and he's going to now marry a sister. So we know what, we can't allow Asufi to marry anyone in case he finds his paternal sister. Elamata Asufi lo yisa. Wait a second, but the law is that Asufi is allowed to marry another Asufit. So should we also prohibit that? Because Shema Yisachoto ben Mavi ben Imo. If you have two foundlings and now they grow up, they happen to find each other. They don't know neither father and neither mother, and so it could be that they're either maternal or paternal sisters. So how come we don't make a gezerah there? So he says, Kol hane shadev azle. What do you think? It's so common that this happens. This is not common that a same person is going to father two kids from different women, both foundlings, or that the same mother will have two children from different fathers, and they'll both be foundlings, right? The same people, they don't go do this all day long, like this is their job, that there's going to be so many foundlings from the same mother or from the same father. Okay, so bat asufi lo yisa, shema yisa hoto, hold on, but then we should make a gezerah of the daughter of an asufi. A daughter of asufi is also an asufi, and it's permitted for a bat asufi to marry an asufi because they're the same status. Should we make a gezerah here also? And that's not allowed because maybe it will be his sister. See, in this case, it's a permitted marriage. The bat asufi is the daughter of a permitted marriage, assuming that some guy who has some lineage problem marries some woman who has some lineage problem marries an asufi, and so and they have a child. Now, that could be anyone. It could be any kosher person. So we don't have to assume it's the same person that's a repeat offender. That was the problem before. Like, what? Everybody's a repeat offender? Okay, fine, not a repeat offender, but you have this asufi guy. So, some man had a child who's an asufi, and then he went and married someone who's permitted to him and who happens to be an asufit. So they have a child, and so should we? That child is also is an asufit. So should we say that this is prohibited? But should we make a gezerah here also? Because this is not a repeat offender. Although he had one offense, but then he went married properly, someone who's permitted to. So we should make a gezerah there. No, ela la shechiach. This case is not likely, and therefore all these cases are not likely. It's not likely in the first case that this foundling and that foundling happen to have the same mother, happen to have the same father. All these are unlikely. Rather, the reason that the rabbis made this gezerah, it's not a gezerah, rather made this extra drabanan stringency, is to have a higher standard regarding lineage. Although on Doraita level you can follow the majority and you don't have to worry about minority cases, but the rabbis say for lineage we want to be extra careful and be 100% sure. Some more laws about an asufi child. If someone finds an abandoned child and has a brit milah, it does not have the laws of asufi, meaning it's considered kosher and can marry anyone. Why? because since someone took the care of giving it a circumcision, that means it has parents that care about it, and maybe they had to abandon it because they're poor or whatever. But if a kid really doesn't, the parents don't care about it at all, and it's mamzer or whatever, then they would abandon and not take care of it at all. So that's the assumption in this and the following categories. If the child was somewhat cared for, then we assume it's a kosher child, and it was abandoned because they're poor or whatever, some other reason. If it had no care, then we worry that it's a mamzer and has the laws of asufi that cannot marry. Mishalete hadame en bo mishum asufi. If its limbs are adjusted, back then, if the kid was born with their limbs like out of the socket or bent, so then they would swaddle them tight to get the limbs straight. So that's some medical care. So if it has some medical care, then it's not asufi. Shayif mishcha umela kuchla reme chumre tale pitka vetale kemi'a en bo mishum asufi. If it was anointed with oil, or there was oil smeared on it, or was adorned with rings, or I've had a note hanging from it, this is please take care of me, or there was an amulet on it. In all these cases, it shows that there were parents who cared, and therefore does not have the laws of asufi, can marry anyone. If the child was hanging on a tree, and if it was low enough that an animal could reach it, that obviously the parents don't care about it, so then it has the prohibitions of asufi. But if not, if it was high up and protected, then it does not have the prohibitions of asufi. Zar derta semicha lemata yesh bo mishum asufi imlav en bo mishum asufi. It was placed in a thicket near a town where people aren't usually there, then it has the prohibitions of asufi. If not, if it's a place where it's likely to be found, that means the parents cared about it, so that does not have the prohibitions of asufi. Ben kinishta semichta lemata ushchichi barabim en bo mishum asufi imlav yesh bo mishum asufi. If it was found in front of a bet knesset, or in a bet knesset that was close to a town where people are found, so then it does not have the prohibitions of asufi. But if not, there were sometimes batei knesiot that were out, not near the town. So, and if you put it there, not likely to be found, it means the parents don't care about it, and so it must be more problematic. Like it doesn't have both parents, they weren't together, they're so more likely to be mamzer, so it has prohibitions. Amar amemar, ha pera de souffle yesh bo mishum asufe. If it's a kid is put in the cistern where you put date pits for animal fodder, that's not a good place to put a kid. So that means they don't care about it. Charifta de nahara en bo mishum asufi. If it's in the middle of a fast-flowing river, that sounds bad, but let's say it's in some kind of safe place on a rock, in the middle of a river where boats do pass, so then it's likely to be found, so no prohibitions of asufi. Pishre yesh bo mishum asufi. If it's at the side of a river, then it has the laws of asufi because no one's going to find it on the side of the river. If at the street, it's the opposite. On the side of the road, that means someone cared for it, so no problem asufi. In the middle of the road, it's likely to get trampled on. That means the parents didn't care about it, put it, in a dangerous place, and therefore it has the prohibitions of asufi. Amar Rava, Vishne Ravon en bo mishum asufi. Rava said, if it's an actual year of famine years, where it's more likely that the parents do proper parents, but they just can't afford to feed it, then it has no law of asufi. Now, Rava, which law was he coming to limit? Had Rava ahaya ilem adashut rabim aide de shne rabon ketalahi. So if you say, if it's in the middle of the street, then it is in asufi, unless it was a year of famine. Wait, just because you're a famine, they think the parents want to kill the kid, right? They couldn't afford to feed it, so they should put it in a safe place. They're still not going to put it in the middle. So therefore, if it's the middle of the street, even during a year of famine, it's going to have a law of asufi. If it's on the side of the road, then it doesn't matter if it's a famine year. Even if it's not a famine year, it's okay. It's not asufi on the side of the road. Ela kitmar derava ahad amar Rav Yehuda amar Rabbi Abba amar Rabbi Yehuda bar Zabdi amar Rav kol zman shebashuk aviv ve'aviv ne'emanim alav ne'asaf min hashuk en ne'emanim alav. Rather, Rava is limiting this law of Rava, that as long, let's say there's a child that's abandoned in the marketplace, as long as it's still there in the marketplace, and then the father or the mother come and say, "Oh, it's mine. I claim it. I changed my mind. I want to take the child." We believe them as long as it's still there. But once it was gathered, in other words, someone else came and took the child in, and then some guy or some father or mother come claim and said, "Oh, it's mine," we do not believe them anymore, because maybe they're lying. Who says it's theirs? Now, when is this true? Only in a regular year. Dava says, but if it's a famine year, then we do believe them, and bo mishum asufi, and we assume that they put it there because they were down and out and afraid they couldn't feed it, but then they changed their mind and they came back, and so even after it's someone else takes it, if someone comes and claims the child, we'll believe them. My tama amar Rava ho'il v'yasa alav shem asufi. Rava explains what's the reason that once someone else takes it in a regular year, they're not believed, because once it has a designation of an asufi, that's it. It's an asufi, it has the prohibitions of an asufi, and the mother or father come in claiming and say, "No, it's good lineage, it's mine, my child," cannot change it. That's the normal rule. But if it's a famine year, then we assume that they put it there because of a famine and they changed their mind, not because there was anything wrong with the lineage. So in a year like that, if the father or mother come and say, "Oh, it's ours and it's fine, it's good lineage," then we believe them. These people may not generally be trusted to testify, but if they say their testimony right away, then we can deem them credible. Asufi, we just saw, a midwife and someone who exempts her friends, which we'll discuss. Asufi hadamaran, Asufi, you believe a father and mother would come immediately while their kid is still in the marketplace, and they come and claim the child. We believe them, and they say that's a good lineage, so then the child will not have the law of an Asufi. Chaya, Detanya. Chaya nemet lomar ze yasa rishon v'ze yasa sheni. A midwife is believed to say, if a mother has twins, is to say that this one was born first and this one was born second. It's important to know which is the Bechor. And when is this true? She's believed only if she stayed in the room the whole time and she didn't go and leave. But if she left and came back, no good, because maybe they were switched while she was out of the room. Rabbi Eliezer is stricter, and he says, no, only if she is in her place, then she's believed. But if not, no. What's the difference between them? If she turns her head aside afterwards, then she's not believed. Maybe when she looked away, they were switched. So she not only is not enough that she can't leave the room, she cannot even look away. Poteret chavroteha maihi. What's the third case of someone who's believed immediately? Someone who exempts her friends. Titnan. Mishnah nida. Nashim shayu yishanu b'mita achat. V'imsa dam tachat achat mehen kulan temeot. You have three women sleeping in one bed, and then you find that there's blood in the bed, and we want one of them became a nida. So we don't know which one, because they're all sleeping. They're all in the same bed. So then all of them are tameh, because we don't know which one it is. So they all have to be machmir. But achat mehen dimset temeah. He But if one of them does a check, an internal check, and finds that she's the one that's tameh, she started her nida, then she is tameh, and we assume that the blood on the bed is from her, and the other two women are tahor. Amar Rav Chisda shebat kasma keshur vesed. Rav Chisda said that's only if she checked herself right away. How soon? The amount of time it would take to do a check quickly. Then we believe her right away. But if it's after a long time, then who knows? Maybe she became a nida after, and the blood is actually from one of the other women. And midwife is believed to say, this child is a kohen, this child is a vi, this natin is a mamzer. In other words, the midwife knows which baby came from which mother. And so if she knows that this this is a family of a mamzer, then she can testify the kid's mamzer or kosher or Levi, whatever. But that the midwife is only believed if there was no objection registered. In other words, if in a previous case someone said, "Oh, this midwife is wrong," and complaints about her, she's not trustworthy anymore. But if If nobody has complained and she was right all along before, that's okay. Or another interpretation, if she's believed regarding this child is a Kohen, unless there's some statement against it. Someone comes and says, no, not true. This is the wrong baby. This baby is from that one and not this one. So in the absence of any other objection, the midwife is permitted. The midwife is believed. Ad ad demai. Now, what kind of objection are we talking about? If we're talking about that one witness came and said what the midwife says was not true, so we're going to dismiss one witness because Rabbi Yochanan said that an objection is not worth anything unless it's at least two witnesses. Rather, there must be in fact two witnesses come and say, no, this is the baby that came from that mom. And therefore, we in that case, the witnesses win, and the midwife is not trusted. Or we can say what we said originally. It could even be one witness would overrule the midwife. Rabbi Yochanan said you need two only in the case where there's a chazakah that overturned. But here there's no chazakah because the kid was just born, so there is no status of the kid yet. And so one witness can overrule the midwife. You need two witnesses to overrule a chazakah. Chazakah would be, let's say, someone is grown and they're a kohen. They've been doing kohanim and getting kohen all along. And then one witness comes and says, oh, no, there's not a kohen. No, that one witness cannot overrule a chazakah. For that, you would need two. Last case. Ne'eman ba'al mekach lomar, lazeh macharti ve'lazeh en macharti. There's two people that come and they both claim that they bought this item from the seller. So the seller is believed. Seller, we ask you, who did you sell it to? Buyer A or buyer B? But that's only true when the item is still in the hands of the seller, still in the store. So then he's believed. It's in his hands. He could say, I didn't sell it to anybody. So since it's in his hands, he's believed to say, who is the rightful buyer who gave him money. So now why don't we look at the money and see who gave him this money, right? And then you could tell who the buyer is. Rather, we're talking about a case where he got money from both of them. One of them, he accepted money as the buyer. The other one said, "Here, take this money." He just, threw it, left it there against the will of the seller. The seller didn't want it. But now he has both piles of money from both people. But now he got mixed up. He doesn't know which was the buyer that he had in mind, that he's the rightful buyer and accepted his money, and which one did he just take the money against his will, but he was going to give it back, and he didn't mean to sell it to that guy. He forgot which one it is. In such a case, as long as he still has the item in his hand, he's believed to say which one the buyer is. But if it's not in his hand, then we don't believe him. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.